Welcome to the second episode of this podcast on how universities can help to tackle urban challenges, learnings from Ghent. In this series, we're exploring the many ways in which cities and their universities can collaborate, and we're especially focusing on community-based research and learning and what makes Ghent so good at it. I'm your host, Sarah, and today we're with Katrien Van Poeck, who is a professor at the Center for Sustainable Development here at Ghent University, focusing on the role of teaching and learning in the pursuit of building a more sustainable world. She is also a member and co-founder of the Laboratory for Teaching Practices. She has a special interest in the relation between sustainability, education, research and practice, and engages in initiatives to foster the co-creation of better sustainability education in collaborative settings with researchers and practitioners. Katrien, thank you for joining me. Can you maybe tell us a bit about how you became interested in this specific approach on learning?
It's an interesting question, how I became interested in these forms of learning. It actually started when I was working as a policy advisor for the Flemish government. And we started there with several new people at the same time, and we got introduced by older colleagues. And something that struck me from the very first moment when working there was a tension between, on the one hand, the urge of so many people working in environmental education and sustainability education to help solving these really urgent societal problems, crisis even, I would say. And on the other hand, a lot of warnings from pedagogical researchers, for instance, on the danger of being too instrumental and using education as a form of indoctrination. So when we started there, we all got a booklet on our desk with the title in Dutch, Milieueducatie van overtuigen naar overleggen, which means environmental education from convincing people to deliberation or something like that. Mm-hmm. It was written by Danny Wildemeers from Leuven University, and in this book he really pointed to the danger of indoctrination and argued for different forms of education.
Mm-hmm. And why is it important, in your view, that students can study real problems in the city or society rather than staying in the so-called ivory tower?
Yeah, I think it's important not to do only that all the time, but to create sufficient opportunities to engage in this, because it creates pedagogical opportunities that are not present in like traditional classroom teaching as we experience it most of the time, I think. It allows students to actually acquire a lot of knowledge in the first place about complex sustainability issues. But if it would be limited to acquiring knowledge about the problem, there's a risk that students get overwhelmed, and not only a risk, we see this happening. There's a lot of literature recently about eco-anxiety, eco-paralysis, students that lose hope, that feel powerless. And we see also in the curricula in compulsory education, but also in what is taught in higher education, that a lot of focus is on what the problem is, and that students get very few opportunities to actually engage in a search for solutions, let alone in trying to experiment with implementing solutions. While when they do so, they get a lot of opportunities, for instance, to apply knowledge in practice, but also to acquire practical skills, to engage in deliberation, argumentation, and experience, for instance, that there may be a lot of different opinions that might be conflicting on how to, or on what the problem is in the first place, but also what would be the best way to solve it. And they get also an experience of being part of a solution, which can counteract the powerlessness and the eco-paralysis.
So engagement of education with the societal issues is a good thing, but there's a risk of an instrumentalization of education. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, that's the thing that was also very much in focus in this book that I found on my desk when I started in this field. And I think also a lot of teachers experience the burden put on their shoulders to solve all kinds of societal problems, while education also has other values in itself. And I think the instrumentalization takes shape in different ways. It's an instrumentalization of the school, turning it into a societal problem solver. It's also an instrumentalization of teachers that have to fix a lot of things in society and have an increasing feeling that it keeps them away from the work that they actually want to do and should do also. And on the other hand, it's also an instrumentalization of the students. It's like putting the burden of solving societal problems on the shoulders of the young generation. So this is something that I think we should always keep in mind when engaging in that sort of collaborations and working with real-world problems, that it's first of all an educational endeavor, a pedagogical purpose, and that it cannot be left to the students alone and the schools alone to solve these issues, which does not mean that they cannot play a role in it and that education does not have something to offer. But yeah, it's a warning for being too instrumental on this.
When you talk about societal challenges, what type of societal challenges are most suitable as a study for students? Can you maybe give some examples?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of challenges that can be addressed. I have a background in social work. I could imagine a lot of possibilities to work with social work students, for instance, on this low emission zone and how it might differently affect people in different neighborhoods, and specifically vulnerable neighborhoods, for instance, where buying
an electric car.
So we are also doing research on urban neighborhoods who try to install district heat nets. And the people involved in it talk about how much they learn from it, because it has never been done before in a neighborhood that already exists with existing buildings, and a lot of things need to be tried out. It's a lot of experimentation, a lot of learning. There could be many opportunities for students in engineering or urban planning or communication sciences or in a lot of disciplines to get engaged in that sort of joint inquiries with actors in the city. But something that is really vital is to think very well in advance what could be a suitable problem. And we work with a concept, when we work with schools or with university lecturers, we usually work with some tools and a concept that we call didactical carving, which is the translation work that teachers have to do to turn a massive societal problem into a problem that is suitable to work with in the classroom or in an educational context. And two things are really vital in this respect. The first thing is that it's an authentic problem, so that it's not a problem. We see that often in education, that something is presented as a problem, but actually the teacher already knows very well in advance what the right answer is and then guides the students towards this. It's not that sort of problems that we have in mind, but really things where also the teacher needs to engage in an inquiry together with the students. So that's an important aspect. And a second one is that it should be manageable for the students, which has to do with adapted to their intellectual capacity to handle it, but also manageable in the sense of having access to information, having access to those arenas where decisions are made, having some possible influence, either directly or indirectly, and also the possibility to see some effects of what has been done within the same school year or within the same, before the program has come to an end, for instance, in higher education. So these are some examples of things to keep in mind to increase actually the possibility to unlock all the pedagogical potential that this can have.
And what does it take for the city and the university to team up and create a real learning city?
Yeah, the teaming up, I think, is a crucial condition. And I think it involves a number of things. Like it involves maybe a bit of a reconsideration of the dominant way in which they often work together, cities or other societal actors and universities. It's often in a logic of expertise, consultancy, where a very clear question is determined in advance, and then the experts from the university are expected to provide the answers. I think it becomes much more educative, much more interesting for both parties if you actually engage in a joint inquiry to study it together, because then it becomes also educative not only for the students but also for the actors in the city. Like one day I was observing a session of the Stadsacademie, the Urban Academy here in Ghent, and there were people of the city involved and also students. And at a certain moment there was some silence because of a practical interruption. And one of the people from the city suddenly said, wijs. And wijs is a typical Ghent word that in regular Dutch would mean wise, but in Ghent it actually means cool or nice. So I asked him, like, what do you find cool? And then his answer was like, yeah, sitting here discussing with the students makes everything so much more creative than what we are used to doing in our own setting. When we are working among colleagues and we do a brainstorm, we usually come up with the same kinds of ideas, but sitting here, taking time to discuss this with the students, hear all their different perspectives on the same problem, opens up so much more responsibilities. And I think this is something that I value really highly, because I think it's not a matter of escaping our societal responsibility as a university, but more a matter of taking it in a very specific way. And the specific way has to do with creating opportunities that are pedagogical, that are educative, opportunities to be wise, as I explained before. And by doing that, I think the university can play a unique role in taking a societal responsibility in a way that no one else does, to create these educative spaces and times for studying, for sometimes maybe slowing down a bit in the face of all the urgent crisis. I think this also has a place in taking responsibilities for the crisis that we have created.
Now, in Ghent, the city and its universities work together quite well. What would be your advice for places where the collaboration is less well developed?
The first advice would be get started. Try it out, experiment, fail and learn from it. And to get started, I think it's also crucial to find the right people, because that's what we see very often in that sort of initiatives, that a lot depends on people who are really committed and have this authentic drive to engage in this. So I don't think it's very functional to force people into it, or to try to anchor it in structures and making it very institutionalized. I don't really believe in that sort of solutions, but I believe in giving freedom, opportunities, encouragements to people who actually want to do that and who want to do it from a shared mindset. Like it's important to team up a bit there as well, not only at the level of the city and the university, but also at the level of the actual people that will implement it in practice, to make sure that you share more or less the same purposes and approaches and philosophy when engaging in that. And then I think it's mainly a matter of just starting, trying, knowing maybe in advance that it will sometimes be frustrating, discouraging, but it's worth trying and engaging in it, I think.
Okay. Katrien, thank you for joining us today and for convincing us that cities and their universities should team up, because it's really worth it for both the parties. For the next episode, we'll be hearing about the benefits of the city-university collaboration, as well as the most important factors for success. So bye for now, and thank you for being here.